Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Henry Wollmeyer, President and CEO of the National Club Association. It's my pleasure to be today's moderator, and we're so glad that you've joined us. The National Club Association McMahon Group began producing club trends 7 years ago to share research and insight to help club leadership identify the clubs or the trends in the club industry. And this issue focuses on the facility's role in driving membership recruitment and engagement. We've got a great agenda and lineup of topics and speakers for you today. We welcome and invite you to ask any questions of the presenters by typing your question into the question box. We'll go through as many as we can, time permitting. One question that I can go ahead and answer for you now is that yes, following the webinar, we will provide you with a copy of the slides and a recording of the webinar. Today, you'll be hearing from Phil from the National Club Association, Bill, Christian, and Frank from McMahon Group, and Ray from Club Benchmarking. And then I'll rejoin you at the end to moderate the question and answer segment. And it's now my pleasure to welcome in Phil Mike, NCA's Senior Communications Manager and Managing Editor, will set the table for today's webinar by giving us the macro perspective of what is happening with facilities across the country and how that relates to clubs. Take it away, Phil.
Thanks, Henry. And as Henry just mentioned, this part of the presentation focuses on the macro perspective. So we're going to be looking at trends happening outside of the club industry that are trickling into clubs and also posing competition to our community. One of the biggest changes we're seeing is in our own homes. The outdoors have been a respite for millions of Americans as a safe place to connect with others and enjoy activities. And according to a recent survey, 13% of Americans are entertaining family and friends more outdoors than a year ago, and 78% of Americans have upgraded their backyards since the onset of COVID-19, giving rise to the term backyarding. Other data shows that 80% of home designers say outdoor spaces were their top growth category last year. And as we can see, more than half of homeowners plan to buy at least one new piece of outdoor equipment for their yards. We see fire pits, grills, lounges, lighting, sofas. A lot of these amenities you can also find at clubs as well. So clubs need to consider that when trying to bring members to the club. And millennials are outpacing boomers in this area almost 2 to 1. Everything is happening at homes nowadays. Remote schooling is popular and is likely to still be around even next year, as some districts still are providing that option. Also, snow days will be virtual in many jurisdictions, so that component of the home space will still be there. Generally speaking, many white-collar jobs are now remote. 52% of households with incomes over $100,000 say that they're working from home. You could imagine many of them are club members. And as we know, home fitness has been reinvigorated, and consumers are buying more of it. Peloton saw profits grow by 100% last year. Virtual fitness providers are expanding and including more programs like Fight Camp, which uses Bluetooth punch tracking technology in hand wraps to track workouts and punches and exercises. Home workouts also had a social component limitation, but this is now decreasing as these services can provide chat rooms, workout results to compare with other users, and attendance recording. There's also more incentives to move to smaller cities now. Make My Move is one service that provides a directory for these incentives to move to smaller cities. These incentives include up to $16,000 to individuals. Savannah, Georgia offers $2,000 for moving expenses, and other cities like Topeka, Tulsa, and Baltimore offer their own. Many of the people who are using the services are moving from higher cost cities. And we also see that consumers have been more willing to pay premiums for luxury kitchen amenities. 6 of the top 10 features mentioned in the house listings that sold for more than expected in 2020 were kitchen related, which you can see on the right there. We're at a bit of a crossroads when it comes to going back into the office. About 55% of employees want to work remotely at least 3 days a week. Conversely, about 68% of executives believe employees should be in the office at least 3 days a week to preserve a strong company culture. A recent survey of business owners and office and city planners reveal concerns about not having in-office work. They do acknowledge the benefits of working from home, but raise concerns over work from home fatigue, Zoom fatigue, and employees' eagerness to connect in person again. Some business leaders also worry about the lack of face-to-face communication, worrying that it'll erode corporate culture. And without a strong cultural capital, HR is going to be relied upon more to create more positive employee experiences. This group also acknowledged that in-person communication created a more innovative work environment. So businesses have an opportunity now to create more vibrant and active workplaces that often can be walkable for employees and to keep things interesting for them. We don't know exactly where the workplace is going to go, but we do know some things about it and the skills that'll be required. One of them is that employers should begin to engage employees like customers. New research shows that businesses want better employee experiences, but few workers feel that employers prioritize them. And companies should have the tools to create consumer-like experiences to engage employees throughout their tenure and to keep them motivated, keep them engaged. The pandemic has also prioritized workplace flexibility, as we're all aware of. Some ideas implemented now include designated days off, no meeting days, and meal reimbursement. We also seen empathetic leadership being prioritized and being aware of other people and their needs. Employers should rethink how they develop talent by prioritizing those soft skills that can strengthen company culture. And we also know that as work goes remote, employers can tap into talent pools beyond just their locality to strengthen their workforce. We also know that 100% remote is probably not going to be likely. There are reports saying that we will have more remote work, but the idea of being universal, we're just not there yet. And layouts will eventually need to include more communal spaces, meeting areas like cafes and comfortable seating that you see in this photo. And there's an element of in-person FOMO, that fear of missing out. There are benefits of working from home, but some remote workers may fear missing out on the influence that in-office workers have. And there are incentives that businesses are creating to bring people back. One company, CoStar, is offering employees a chance to win a Tesla if they report back to work. So I might need to get a part-time job there. Thanks, Henry, for that. Restaurants continue to adapt. Bonchon, a Korean fried chicken chain, moved to a limited service model during the pandemic. Since then, it's become so successful that they're making the model permanent in some locations. Their goal was to downsize to lower costs while maintaining quality and emphasize their online presence. Kenny Gilbert, Oprah's former personal chef, he was about to launch a full-fledged restaurant just before COVID, but now opened a small one that has only just himself and one other employee, and he plans to keep it that way. So we're looking at new ways to keep costs down. Similarly, ghost kitchens or delivery-only models have risen in popularity in the wake of the pandemic, benefiting the rise of delivery apps like Uber Eats and DoorDash. And there's still a demand for in-person dining. 68% of consumers say that they are very excited to dine at restaurants. In Houston, a Dish Society, that restaurant offers a hybrid model that provides over-the-counter service during the day and full service at night. Other chains envision models with outdoor and open air seating for their facilities. And on the right, as we see physical spaces in restaurants that people feel least comfortable, we see restaurants, indoor dining, host station, those types of areas where people convene. Hotels are investing more in the health of their travelers. We're seeing more investment in in-room fitness equipment, stationary bikes, treadmills, on-demand virtual workouts, things that prevent people from needing to go into the main fitness facility there to avoid gathering. And so people have their own personal space. Hygiene is important. UV light and electrospray is being used. Air purification systems are being installed in hotels, restaurants, and office spaces. And 70% of travelers are more likely to book at a sustainable hotel than not. The interesting thing about that is that the survey found that most people don't go into their hotel system thinking that they want an eco-friendly place. It just happens to be that they end up booking those more often. Wellness programming is more accessible than ever before. Nap facilities, these are nap pods. They're more visible now at airports, workplaces, spas. They provide little areas for people or rooms for people to relax, recoup, catch up on some rest. Meditation spaces are becoming more available in brick and mortar facilities. Yoga studios are doing more of this, fitness centers, gyms, and there are now mobile spaces doing it as well, such as in LA and New York City. There are now buses, and this photo is actually an image from one of them that provide little pods where people can book and reserve 15 to 30 minutes, listen to relaxing sounds, recoup, go through meditation exercises. And even virtual apps like Headspace and Calm have services at spas now and are considering purchasing hotels and resorts. So these are ideas for you to consider at your clubs on how to innovate. That concludes my presentation. I'm pleased to introduce Bill McMahon Sr. and Christian Clerk.
Good. Well, thank you so much, Phil. And we're talking a little bit about something very dear to our hearts. Christian and I are both in the architectural side of this thing, and we create beautiful buildings. But as Phil has shown us, in the new trends that are coming out of the COVID period, safety, security, and environment have become very important from the viewpoint of protecting our staff, protecting our members. And the important thing is that in looking at those areas of a building, in the next slide, you can see historically, we always focused on comfort, beauty, usage, and great grill rooms, bars, and all those things. And those are still very important. And Frank Payne's going to talk about that with Christian a little bit later about the relevant club. But we're going to focus a little bit here, a few slides on the environment that we live in and how important it is to have a good environment, both in the building and outside in the greater world, talking about safety, talking about security. These are things that are important today if you're going to attract members and keep them and getting members to use their club. So as we kind of move to looking at the safety and security issues, obviously the clubhouse and from the COVID period has been focused on from the viewpoint, many of our buildings today are ancient from the viewpoint of 100-year-old clubhouses, 80-year-old clubhouses, but are buildings that have mechanical systems that date back to that same period. And the issues of ventilation, fresh air, things like that, very important to the safety of our inhabitants of these buildings, and are going to have to be a major emphasis henceforth if we're ever going to address these issues. Kitchens are important. Also, the importance of not having hazards in a building that could basically help people to trip and fall, outdoor lighting. This next slide kind of shows some areas that you can see to the left. Nice to have a lake off a patio space, but obviously from the viewpoint, the issue there, of course, is small children having steps. Basically, on the right-hand side, you see that yellow strip over there. One steps type stairways are extremely dangerous because people don't pick up the perception of difference in elevation. Putting tents in, you can see the tents over certain areas. One of the real things is too that's important is that last slide of changing children's wading pools. I should say that last bullet to the right, changing wading pools to spray pools that don't hold water is very important. Small children can basically drown in 15 inches of water. And it happens many times when a child will slip under. And if the parents aren't watching, my wife has pulled many a child out of the pool at Belle Reve, as you can see, and not our own children, I hope. And the other issues to look at would be looking at the security issue of clubs. And security in today's world, look what's happening in our cities today. We've been very blessed in our clubs of not having threats and things like that affect that. But when you get clubs of a couple of thousand members, they actually do have very, card systems, et cetera, to control entry. Most of our clubs today are wide open. If you have a coat and tie on, you can get in almost any club in the country. So it's going to be important to monitor parking lots, to have entry gates. Some of the funniest ones, of course, is the clubs have been very successful by having a guard shack out there, but having a mannequin in there that lights up and things like that. But it is going to be important that we look at security and that we develop programs that basically protect our members and our staff persons. At this point, what I'd like to do is introduce Christian Clare, my fellow architect over here, and he's going to talk about clubs and their natural environment.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, and Bill mentioned the importance of cleanliness and clubs. And throughout this last year, when we went to a digital environment, we're seeing so much more demand for clubs. And Frank will mention this later, but the clubs are doing extremely well. There's waiting lists that we haven't seen before in years. And the clubhouse really is the central part where clubs get together. And so the clubhouse is the primary, that is the interface between where members come together and then how they experience the environment. And it's important that the systems that are within that clubhouse interface and are providing for the experience that members want, but do it in the way that members want. And so when you think about the clubhouse as that pivot point, that keystone of the member experience, this is where they're coming together before they go out onto the course, before they go to the pool. And with the systems that are running that clubhouse, there's a lot of opportunities for clubs as they come together as a social entity, working together. There's things that you can do: solar panel use, geothermal systems, electric car charging, water conservation, and mechanical systems. These all can integrate in with the clubhouse. One of the biggest consumptions of resources is the energy that a building uses. So 39% of all energy in the United States consumed is within buildings. And so when you're doing a clubhouse renovation or considering a clubhouse renovation, considering how are we going to be using this building in the future is extremely important, not just from a first cost, but from the long-term use of the building and what are the conservation costs, what are our operating cost reductions that we can do. And I want to thank Ray for this slide. This is an expense per square foot slide, and I thought it was important because it lets you see, okay, the size of your facilities do matter, but that's not the only thing. So Frank and Ray will get into this later with what these percentiles mean, but it's important that on the left you have the lower costs, and on the right you have the higher, and that's going to be related to the size of buildings. But here we're seeing that's normalized for the size of buildings. So what is really reflective of is activity. And that makes a difference when you aggregate that over all of your facilities. So the clubs in the lower 25th percentile, which tend to be ones that aren't activated as much, are about, or they're over half of what an active club at 350,000. And so as you're looking at energy and how it's being used in a clubhouse and all your facilities, it aggregates. And the technology that's developed over the last 10, 15 years now gives you the ability to pay attention on a wide range of scales, and we'll get into that. So the first thing when you're looking at your clubhouse and you're trying to figure out, well, what can we do in terms of our energy consumption? I don't know how many walkthroughs we've been through where you get into the mechanical systems and I'm like, Bill, what is that?
Well, you would have to say, if you look at bullet 3 there, I say many older clubs are museums of systems developed 100 years ago. It's unbelievable. You may have replaced the boiler, but the same radiators and things are there. And so we have really, this is a major area, not only from the viewpoint of energy consumption, but for safety of the inhabitants of the buildings. That has to have some major emphasis. And it's not cheap to do because it also will affect how you have to do redecorate and things like that. But it's a major emphasis that's coming out of the COVID period.
And that gets when you're looking at these older systems, it directly affects point 1 and 2. How much energy has been consumed? How are you using it? And when you have older systems, it's hard to get information. I mean, some of these systems may be on pneumatic thermostats still. So it's important when you're looking at renovating that there's really a key opportunity to update those systems so that you can know what you're actually using.
Well, I think one of the interesting things too is that historically, if you look at your homes and different buildings, you had a thermostat for a whole floor, for a whole bank of rooms. Today, with the energy systems, you have a thermostat or a control device for every single air handler, radiator, et cetera, in a building. And they're all controlled through a central monitoring system, giving us tremendous flexibility for comfort, but also for savings and not running systems when buildings are empty.
Yeah, and that's key. Point 5 gets to that members are expecting that your facilities are going to be run well and run efficiently in a sustainable, both financially, but also in the environment. this is a great example that
Sleepy Hollow,
yeah,
right?
yeah, I love
Well,
it.
you know, I always love this one. This is a Rockefeller Vanderbilt old mansion, great golf course, great club. And you can see that they put in extensive solar panel systems on a new roof that wasn't a part of the original building. But the important thing I think this shows is that even in New York, it works. And I will tell you that when we go into clubs and looking at facilities, I want to see those solar panels somewhere, because it makes a very strong statement to the next generation that we care about the environment. And that's an important aspect. If you want to attract members, you better be in sync with what those members value.
Yeah, see the shining sea, you know, Round Hill in California. Here's an example of how you can integrate and really respond to members' expectations that you're doing things sustainably. And here's a set of typologies that in the project that they implemented. So if you're thinking, well, solar panels might be for us, there's different ways. You may not have this square footage of a flat roof that Sleepy Hollow had. Maybe you can put some over your bocce courts. Maybe you can put it over your parking lot. There's scalable ways that you can engage in this technology. It doesn't have to be all in all at once. And this is a great example. You know, the last year, a lot of stuff has been going digital, right? And digital things require power. All member experiences are going to be requiring power in the future, because members are going to experience a level of service that you couldn't achieve without the systems in place. This is a great hydronic temperature control systems for greens at Southern Hills, and it allows them to grow grass that they wouldn't have been able to grow before, and the members now get to experience those greens. They may not even see these. I mean, they're artfully masking where the chillers are for these systems. There's 4 heat pumps, and you know, it was innovative when Augusta did it back in the 1980s, but now we're seeing these systems come online, and they're much more frequently being implemented. And so when you have systems and you're looking at, okay, we have this energy use, which is a good thing. It's reflected, like those slides earlier, it's reflective of activity of the club being alive. And so you got to manage it though. Make sure you're spending the energy, and well, I think of it as a membership multiplier, right? Those dues dollars being paid. So what you do is you collect the information, you filter the information just like any data, and you want to look at specific information per unit of equipment, so that it's interval data from your meters, but you're also measuring and verifying how each piece of equipment is using, and that allows you to have a refined comb to knowing, well, we were going to tell our members we're more sustainable, but now we have a data-driven approach that actually shows.
Well, you know, too, Kristen, I think it's important to think as architects. I mean, we design buildings for developers who basically build a building, fill it up, and then flip it to someone else. In other words, they don't hold it long. And so the ultimate developer, the ultimate owner, is probably a pension fund somewhere that then has to reap the rewards of maintaining inefficient systems. Clubs like hospitals and schools, those types of institutions basically should invest in their facilities for the long haul, because they're not going to sell that building. They're not going to flip it. So you will definitely, if you keep a building long enough, and we always do in our club, you will be rewarded with lower energy costs, which will in the long term help us on keeping our dues competitive. And members and boards really respect that if you explain it to people.
And so when you're thinking about energy initiatives of the past, you'd be hiring an engineer. He'd be coming in. He'd be theoretically putting together some calculations, and it would take time. And even after you had it done, you have a special event where you're changing the system, and then you're not sure how to reset it. You're not going to redo that process. So it takes time and it takes money. The new way is essentially monitor your systems continuously. So rather than having that mechanical engineer come in and reevaluate your system, and are you connecting, are you running it correctly, you're watching those fans, you're looking at the air handling units, are they running at the right time? And what's important here is that the control systems today even may not be saving that information. So you have an event at Christmas and something goes wrong, maybe you figure out, maybe you don't, right? But if you have an energy management system, you're remembering, so that you're developing this knowledge base that helps you manage that energy in the future.
Right, and this is really just bringing our clubs up to date with what's happening with energy and all aspects of buildings. The clubs, we're the last. We always seem to be the last to do things, but it's in a way now that I think we're going to have to respect that. And it's because the energy can get very expensive, and the investment is well worth the while doing it, because we keep our buildings long enough to make a real payback.
You know, and there's an advantage to being the last to market, right? Because
Yeah.
it's figured out. So, you know, you may be thinking, well, what can we do? What can we do at our club? This is great information. What are some steps? So there's 3 primary ways of looking at your energy management. First is you're collecting that utility data. So you can tie into your utilities, download that information, and do that. That was some of the information that we saw from club benchmarking earlier. And the key to the next step, though, is to live control of that equipment, is managing your assets. So we all know what asset reserve studies are. We understand how we fund those asset reserves. We understand projects. So the key there is those decision points where there's an intersection. So how do we plan for that air handling unit that might be older, but we're not really sure how much it's going to last, and we've got a $3 million project coming on board.
Right, or it's malfunctioning or something and you don't know about it, but now you can monitor that with a piece of equipment, a very simple little piece of equipment that tells you in your energy management system that there's a problem with air handler number 4, and you can fix that in ways that you could not do before.
And so you can take that information and really use it to help your entire master planning process. So you're removing the question marks. So now instead of going through the planning process and saying, well, how is our equipment going to function? You plan for it. And then when you have new buildings that you have, which ultimately there will be additions, you can essentially plan for those systems to integrate both with the new and with the old.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing too in monitoring buildings and things like that, I can assure you that 99% of the buildings today, we don't build many new buildings, new clubhouses. So a great majority of our clubhouses are ancient in systems. Even our Club Belle Reef here in St. Louis was built in the 1950s. That's 70 years ago, and we're still using systems there that, and right now they're looking at upgrading some of that information. But all I'm saying is it's time to bring energy as a more focused importance to our clubs, and to make that energy usage more safe for our members in our HVAC systems.
So those are the three broad categories on how energy is being managed today. And you may be thinking, well, what can we do at our club? We can send you a self-assessment tool, and it applies to the whole gamut. And you may be thinking, this is a great idea. We need to develop a master energy plan. Or you might just have expensive infrastructure that you know that replacement's on the horizon. And you're trying to figure out how can we plan for it? How do we prioritize what equipment we replace when? You may even have advanced control systems. Again, advanced control systems are meant for advanced users. And you may not have a mechanical engineer that can help you program that or reprogram it when you go from banquets to a la carte dining. Having that information there is critical to help you guide your future.
And then we can provide that with the self-assessment tool. We've done that in different areas of clubs before, in operations and things like that, to give you a simple assessment tool to help you analyze your buildings and see what's going on. Not to get into the complex engineering, but to basically with some basic information, and it's pretty obvious, we can give you a report back on that as to how effective your programs are and where their potential improvements can be made. So at this point, let me kind of wrap up our part of it, the safety, security, environmental portion. It's important, I think, that my last statement would be that you integrate this type of information, the safety, security, environmental systems, with good technology in future club design. Most of the time, almost all the time, we're renovating buildings. As I said, very seldom are we doing the new ones, maybe 1% of the time. This is going to be an important part, and it can be done with every building, no matter what age it is. So at this point, I'm going to introduce my good friend, Frank Vane, president of McMahon Group, and he and Christian will take over.
Well, thanks, Bill and Christian. Great to be with you. I have the opportunity and honor to join you today from the Atlanta Athletic Club in Atlanta, Georgia, where they do an absolutely remarkable job of combining the great history and tradition of the club and showcasing that, and at the same time, offering relevant and just great facilities and modernized dining and social spaces, all the recreational components of the club as they do that. So a great kind of case study. And I would say, you really think of this as to what Bill and Christian just went through there, sort of a three-legged stool, right? We have the back of the house infrastructure and everything that was just covered there. as part of it. We have the, sort of the front of the house then amenities as the other piece of this. And then often when we're kind of cloaking that and recognizing the tradition and history of the club at the same time, that's really a winning combination and something to think about. But of course, in club success, the whole notion of relevance of those facilities are inextricably linked. Relevance is something that matters, of course. It means it's important or it's highly desired. The other thing we look at there is it evolves over time, and importantly, I know as we look at it, it's really important to measure, sort of to recognize who's judging that, right? And it's established by the consumer. So one of the challenges in the club world is that they often want to dictate to the up and coming generation as to what they should like, and this is the way we've always done it here. And of course, the up and comers have their own view and their own mindset, and that really is that disconnect is what's led to outright failures and a failure to adapt and kind of obsolescence on the part of many clubs. So as we look, moving on into, sort of thinking about relevance, another way to characterize that is the notion of value, right? Derived from relevance. If we are offering those relevant experiences and relevant facilities, the consumer then judges your club to have value. And we think in the future, in a society where we're less concerned about social plumage and those sorts of things, value is a big rating aspect of the club experience, of what the consumer wants from the club as they look at it. And so that's all reflected in what demand do we have for membership? Are we backfilling the attrition? Are members, is members utilization increasing on a regular basis? Ray talks a lot about, obviously, is the club increasing its net worth, or is it increasing the initiation fee? Those are all how society, how the consumer, how the marketplace that you're in is judging your club and determining the relevance of your experience. One of the big opportunities for clubs that we see going forward is in demographics. And so this chart here, the blue line is showing you number of people born each year going back nearly 100 years now. And looking at that, you see kind of in the middle of the chart, the peak there in 1957, the peak of the baby boom generation. You see 1990, the peak of the millennial generation, both times about 4.5 million people born in those years. The good news for clubs as we see it is that just in that third gray block to the right shows the rise of the millennial generation. And that the number of people now between ages 35 and 45, and as here we're expressing, the average joiner of a country club is a 42-year-old couple. The number of people in that age group is going to be increasing now all the way from where we are today, about the next 10, 12 years, we're going to see increasing supply. So this is a great opportunity for clubs and an opportunity to leverage this consumer advantage that's going to be out there for us if we're providing the right projects or the right facilities. If we look at the next slide here and see, look at the millennial generation here. Next slide, Allison. We see we see the millennials there as a young and up and coming generation, very diverse, and what they're looking for, and they're really looking for these personalized interactions at their club. They're very spontaneous, so they like these drop-in spaces. They're very early adopters of technology. So whether it's the back of the house technology Christian and Bill just talked about, or the front of the house with your apps and other ways to order and make reservations, those are important aspects of catering to this generation. The good news is if we win over the millennials in the club space, they do a great job of winning over their friends, right? They are natural referral agents for us. And so they use their social media, they use Instagram and those things for us to support their preferred spaces and places. So as we respond to their needs, we can really see some momentum pick up in the club space with our branding, with consumers understanding our club. Now, a lot of that's going to take investments, right? And some of the big things that we're seeing out there, that capital really creating change in the club environment. Golf is changing, one of the most historic games that there is. And yet, as you saw last week, if you read National Golf Foundation statistics, about as many golf balls are being hit in the screens these days as there are on golf courses. New golf environments are all part of the mix of having a successful golf program at your club. Casual gathering spaces, and as I said, quick casual dining or drop-in areas. Obviously, we've all valued our outdoor spaces this year. Clubs that had them just succeeded marvelously with them. Those who didn't have adopted those. Health and wellness, another big aspect of this, going to be top of mind coming out of the pandemic. Children's activity centers are a big investment area in clubs today, and other fun and games. Sure, we love the traditional games of golf and regulation tennis, but we see the growth in areas like pickleball and bocce, and just game rooms, video games and the like for adults and for children. Wi-Fi cafes, remote work is certainly more present, as Phil was talking about, this kind of hybrid lifestyle and hybrid work style that people are going to have. And then, of course, resort style pools. Christian will talk a bit about that, what we call that gateway amenity. Again, thinking about your target being that young up and coming family. So investing in your facility is extremely important to do that. And we've got some images here of some kind of winning investments that you would see. In the golf space, we'll call that sort of investing in fun and also performance. And so that's things like the putting course here at Pinehurst in North Carolina, right? Mimicked off the old Himalayas at the old course way back in 1867 or so, when that's the only golf that women were supposed to be able to play was the putting course. Now we see them at all leading golf environments across the country. Thunderbird is putting one in near the golf course snack bar now. So again, you'll be able to go to a very casual snack bar, do some putting, enjoy that, enjoy a beverage. I belong to a club in South Carolina that has one that is lit for night putting is very popular there. So we see other aspects of the golf experience in sort of the training aspect and the practice facilities, right? That's a big piece of that. You see here with desert horizons and the desert highlands, or the horse course here at the Prairie Club in Nebraska with these short courses that are fun and interesting, fun to play, doesn't take a lot of time to play. And now we look at some practice facilities here for the indoor side, right? Those are some great outdoor things that you can do on the for golf. On the inside, and for those who are playing golf today, they want the best equipment, they want the data. So as I said here, the TrackMan numbers don't lie, right? You really can understand your swing and your game and practice all you want in these great environments like you're seeing here at Desert Mountain with this. This is the kind of facility that members want, that those who are playing golf. And again, when we think about the up and coming generation, here's a nice project now about to get underway at Meadowbrook in outside Detroit. So this is a neighborhood club, if you will, right? But look at this practice facility that now create, and this is a way that this club that has this space, a lot of our Northeastern clubs have difficulty finding land to do these kinds of things. Here's a club that can have a 300-yard range, short game areas, golf performance center. This will be a tremendous competitive advantage for this club relative to the other clubs in the marketplace. For many of our members today, this is golf. This is the way they're enjoying the game, indoors and outdoors, and certainly some things to think about for a relevant golf experience at your club. As I said, game is moving indoors. We have here Northwoods up in Massachusetts, where recognizing the light use of their banquet areas during the COVID period, they have converted their banquet facility with 4 simulator rooms, and now doing great business as well as building community for the gatherings of the membership in these spaces. So a lot of fun things happening in the golf side. On the other side of that, we take a look at the social side of that. And, you look here at Carmel Country Club in Charlotte, and I'd have to say when we, you want a poster child of the relevant club and relevant facilities, Carmel is probably it. John Schultz, the membership down there have just done a fantastic job as to whether it's the tennis, the resort pool, modernizing the clubhouse, continually reinventing dining. Club has really been at the forefront of all of this, and they really view it as a continuum. So we look at the next slide here. As the club has continually invested money, they regularly update their master plan. They always have a master plan. They complete projects, they go back and look at the plan, and you see here where since 2006, 2007, regular investment of capital over that period of time. Thanks to Ray Cronin for documenting this, a compounded annual growth rate of 8.7% on their net worth, right? So investing money is just like it is in any other. We invest in our lives, we invested in stocks and other assets. When we invest in our club's worth grows. The value of that club will grow for the members in terms of utilization, and for the business in terms of its strength and durability. So as we look next, the shows here, here is just, what's that, 5 major projects that the club has completed in about the last 20 years. And a little bit of a gap on the first one, but now we see really kind of a flywheel effect around B, C, D, and E. Every couple years now, the club is generating membership and generating capital, working from the master plan and putting that capital back in, reinventing their pool, expanding their fitness center, modernizing the dining, each of these aspects. And if you can pick up on those dotted lines there, what you see is that the initiation fee and initiation fee revenue has continually increased at the club because of this. So again, our projects create fun, they create relevance, they create financial and economic success for our clubs at the same time. This is just a beautiful chart, and it just shows you the value of investing in our clubs. We often talk about the cost of that. These projects are certainly not cheap, and they come at a cost, but they increase value of the club and value for the membership. Carmel is now looking and has just recently opened, and you should get by to see this, look at the website, understand what they're doing here. Those 2 blocks that you're seeing on the bottom, on the top right of the slide there, the new Gaslight Grill, the new men's grill at the club. These are a reinvention of dining spaces. You can see here with the reach-in cabinet as we come into the club, kind of a coffee shop effect right there, a community table. I could flip up a laptop here and have a cup of coffee. We might come in and decide, well, let's stay a while and go into this fast casual dining room where we're going to order, and through a flag system, servers are going to bring us fast casual food, a complete separate and distinct concept from what goes on in other areas of the clubhouse. And evidence is strong so far that these rooms are not cannibalizing the other areas. They are adding usage. They are adding new user groups for the club to come out and have a different experience. Families, those who want to be very casual in doing that. I think we're moving on to the next slide there, showing even a little simpler, more straightforward project, kind of Summit Hills here in Covington, Kentucky, right across from Cincinnati there. Had an area, as you see, it's not overly large, a pool, a few tennis courts, and again, in a sequential way, they modernized those spaces and created something new and different for them. So this is another great example. We use Country Club of Detroit many times, where they had these facilities, but by improving the amenities around the traditional areas, a pool that existed and courts that existed, they create energy. So look at these next pictures here as we show the show members. So you come in right now before members arrive. Here's so now we've got fire, and we've got a bar. and look at the profile of this group, right? This is not just families and kids using these areas. These can be programmed for other events, obviously a golf group in the upper left there, a couples and adult event in another location. So a lot of times we talk about investing in these pools or outdoor areas, the thought is immediately to families, and of course that's great, but look at the diverse set of programs you can offer. On the family side, however, straightforward, simple investments give kids a place to go. If we want our club to be family friendly, creating spaces where kids want to hang out, where the kids are saying, let's go to the club, where they're making friends and smiling like they are in this picture, what parent is not going to want to join this club or take their children to this club and find real value in the membership? Very, very, sort of relevance to the max here as to what you could get for a family out of this kind of setup at a club. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, the other games, right? And so pickleball, we all know the popularity of it. Bocce is another one. These games fit into the club world because they're relatively easy to play. Doesn't take long to play. They are done in teams. So again, it's all about community, all about bringing people together these ways. These great games are absolutely perfect for making that happen. So relevant facilities are, key to your success. And I think as a leader of a club and looking at your club, or your board member or manager of a club, thinking about ways to reinvest in our facilities is vital. It retains the members we have and certainly helps us to attract the new ones. Year round is one of the top requests we get from members today. Increases that value, as we saw here on our charts today. That's the perceived value of the member, and it's the economic value of the club. Both sides of that, we have a satisfied membership, and it can take clubs that can really turn them around and make them successful. So as look at that, Christian, who's got firsthand experience, a fellow with 4 daughters who love swimming pools, and so he's going to talk a little bit about the role of swimming pools at clubs and what they do for us.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, when Bill was showing that slide earlier of the patio by the lake, I was like, well, my 3rd daughter, we're not eating on that patio for a couple of years. But this first slide's of Carmel, and showing it to Frank, I love that slide that he showed where it's got the capital investment and the initiation fee. And right where the capital investment gets overtaken by the initiation fee, that was the pool project. And so it's really the pools are pivotal for attracting members and creating that sustained investment in facilities, because people see the value in pools. When you bring your kids to the pool, it's a good time, it's a family time. Here in this photo, you'll see the adult bar area. There's also a snack bar area right next to it. There's another pool down below. There are places for everyone to be able to do something. You can lounge. It's a great place to be. And that slide, this slide, and the next slide, each one of these projects, what I like about them is that the clubs had a decision point. What are we going to do? And they decided to go in and to make the improvement and add energy. And so in this example, they had the bones, they had the courts, they had the pools, but they added the facilities that members wanted to use, the food and beverage, and it gave them a place. It gave the splash pad for the kids, and it really activated what they already had. So not every improvement project is a wholesale, let's clear cut, let's build new. That's not how members respond to the amenities. They want to be able to use the amenities that you have in the way that they want, and this is a great example of that. And here's another example of Reinvention 2015. It's Tiger-Woods' first privately designed course, part of this community. They're serving meals on the 9 holes, but the pools, it's critical. And there's 2 pools in this, and there's a whole series of facilities that are integrated with this, where you've got the Fenway Park, and it's attracting the 42-year-olds that have kids, because this is where they come. It's a layered experience. Where do the parents go? Where do the kids go? Where can we go together? And all the amenities are built around that family life, and it centers around the pool. And not every pool is going to be as colorful, right? That you can integrate family activities within your club. So there's every club, you respond to what your members want. In this club, it's art. You can just look at these photos and you can see how the outside space of the deck is critical. They've got the loungers, the pairs of seating. They've got the children's area in the back. To the left, they've got pool cabanas, different spaces for different folks, but all members of the same club. And again, this is a great photo showing the layering of how these spaces are used. You've got the bocce court, you've got the outdoor dining where people are eating right now. You've got the loungers, you've got seating with tables and umbrellas. The idea that when you're thinking of these pools areas, you gotta be thinking, how can we layer this? How can we layer between adults and family, but then also the different types of spaces that people want. They wanna be lounging alone and then get up, go to sit around and have a conversation. So when you're laying out these types of spaces and you're thinking, what can my club become? Layering is, you gotta have that in the mindset when you're thinking about these designs. And from here, I'd like to introduce Ray to talk about using data to assess your club's asset base.
Thank you, Christian. Happy to be here. It's really remarkable to see some of those pictures and hear some of those stories. We've discovered a metric that I really believe can characterize where your club is. We have a free service. If anyone's interested, we'll do it for you. You can do it on your own. It's probably a 15-minute exercise. And that's my piece of this education session, is to talk about this one metric that will pretty much tell you quickly where your club fits on that relevance. And, I'm going to use this other word which was used by Frank and Christian, but that relevance and fun scale. You see those pictures of Carmel, and it's pretty obvious that the place is fun, and that's why it's had the success it's had. If you look across the industry and you look to the state of the industry, it falls very organically into these three buckets. About a quarter of the clubs are what we call red bucket clubs. They are, in our view, based on the data, they're in serious financial distress. I think the jury's out as to whether they survive the next 5 years, 10 years. They can change their prospects, but to the point of this webinar and all of the things that we've seen, all those fresh and up-to-date assets, some of the environmental aspects that Bill spoke of and Christian spoke of earlier, in the sustainable aspects of facilities, all those things reflect, as Frank said, relevance. They reflect freshness. We're in clubs, all of us are in clubs constantly. You can walk right, you don't even have to walk into the club. If you're pulling in the driveway and you get out in the parking lot, you can instantly see which bucket a club is in. So this quarter of the industry, that's these red bucket clubs, these are the clubs with the facilities that frankly don't drive membership. They probably inhibit membership because they're not relevant, they're not fresh, they don't look new, they don't feel new, they're not up to date. On the other end of the spectrum is the green bucket clubs like Carmel, and that's a club that has made choices, conscious choices, as Frank showed that investment diagram, and Christian had referred to it with the pool project. Those were conscious choices involving the staff, the board, all the committees, the membership at large, conscious choices to grow the club and change the club, up to and including this most recent project that, as Frank said, opened a few weeks back. It's a conscious choice. They were done with the future in mind, with a clear vision of where we're going in mind. And the result of that is facilities that drive membership and are relevant. And then you get the other half of the industry that's somewhere in between. When you look at the result of these, what drives this, it comes down to this one thing that we've talked about throughout the webinar, but it just gets clear to me, just listening even to the previous conversation. I was at a club the last 2 days this week. It's probably, of the near 600 clubs that I've done presentations in are at. It's probably the most unique club of the 600. And it's in an area of Florida in the center of the state where land is worth as farmland about $5,000 an acre. And the land at this club where they put, it's a residential community club, and when they put cabins or houses on the land's value is $33,000 an acre, almost 7 times higher. And it's got to do with this one word, relevance, that's been used. They've put services and amenities in the club, the community, the residential community club, that are so relevant that they can increase the value of land. It's really fascinating. But the clubs that remain relevant, they're the ones with the waiting list. They're the ones with the strong balance sheets. The ones that aren't relevant and have those depreciated facilities, they're the ones that need the most members and have the weakest balance sheets. And it all goes hand in hand. So on the next slide, what we'll see is there's a fundamental aspect of understanding club finances that really, you know, from a financial model standpoint, strikes right to the heart of the concept of facilities that drive membership. And it's this: the blue line on this chart represents the operating result. 90% of the clubs in the industry set the income statement to break even, excluding depreciation. By definition, that means it's about operations, not about capital. There's no capital there. That's off to the side. Well, if this is the actual results, this is pre-pandemic, as noted. There's about 1,000 clubs on this chart, and you can see at the median, that middle, the club in the middle, there's a dot on this blue line for all 1,000 clubs. You can see at the median, that club in the middle, the financial outcome of the operating ledger or the income statement was literally a margin of 0%. The club broke even, literally. And at club benchmarking, we say anything between -4 and +4% is effectively in the break-even zone, which is about 70% of the clubs. And these are actual results. So the point is that most of the money, as we'll see in a minute, flows through the operating ledger, but it's not the financial driver. The purpose of the operating ledger or the income statement is to deliver services and amenities to members. It's literally consumed year in and year out by members enjoying the club. This slide shows where the money comes from the member. It's an analysis of the club at the median in terms of the money the member allocates or expends on the operating ledger versus the capital ledger. It's a 20-year life cycle. So the average club, with the churn that it has, the average member exists at the club for 20 years. In today's dollars, that means the average member is going to expend over the 20 years about $322,000. 85% of that's going to the operating ledger. But what the member gets in exchange for that money is the experience that they enjoyed each of the days in those 20 years. Only 15% of it goes to the capital ledger, but that's the money that manifests as the condition of the club's facilities. At club benchmarking, when we look at this, if we could make that 15% 20, which effectively is $1,000 more a year, so over 20 years, it's $20,000 for the average member. On the margin, it's really nothing. $1,000 a year is $80 a month. It's of no consequence to the member. But think of about what it means to the club. I'm rounding, but the average club has about 454 member equivalents. $1,000 a year is 450 grand a year, times 20 years is $10 million. Can you imagine what the average club's facilities would look like if it had $10 million more invested in them today than it does? It would be almost double the facilities, the extent, the relevance, the breadth, the sustainable aspect of it, the environmental aspect, everything that's been talked about. Can you imagine what could have been done with that extra 10 million bucks, which was only $1,000 a year for the average member? It's a critical point. We have to understand that it's the relevance and the sustainability and the freshnesses of the facilities that's going to drive the member experience. So we have to invest this money. Next slide, please. When you look at the average club's balance sheet, it's the same message. It comes out clearly. If you look at the assets, what a club owns, at the average club, 80% of what a club has at any point in time is the facilities. It's the net book value of property, plant, and equipment. That means after depreciation. If you add cash, which effectively is operating cash and some cash reserves, you get to 90% of the assets. The whole point of looking at the balance sheet is to understand that when you look to the right side, the money that funds those facilities comes from members' equity. There's a little bit of bank debt, but at the average club, it's 70% equity, 30% liabilities. So that $1,000 extra a year that members would have contributed over the 20-year cycle to the average club would increase members' equity by nearly $5 million. And that's because half of that money would have been depreciated over that 20-year cycle. So the average member's equity for an 18-hole country club is about $5 million. And if we had done that, made that decision, have $1,000 a year more in capital from each member, it would have doubled the members' equity, which would have effectively, as I said earlier, doubled the relevance of the facilities we have, which would, of course, set the club up for future success in terms of facilities that drive membership at a club. So there's two types of capital, obligatory and aspirational. Frank's pictures showed a lot of aspirational capital and aspirational projects. Aspirational is adding to or expanding the asset base we have, and obligatory is repair and replacement of the assets we own. To use Carmel as an example, that pool project, all of that new project that Frank showed, that was all aspirational. Now it's become obligatory for the next generation of members. But over that same period of time, Carmel also redid both golf courses. That was obligatory investment. So it's understanding what type of capital we have to do. We have to do the obligatory work, but it's the aspirational investment that drives the result from a member's standpoint. And ultimately, what members' equity is in a club, it's this. It's the sum total of all the capital invested by the members over time, minus the sum total of all the depreciation on the physical assets. In the red bucket clubs, members' equity is the same as it was 10 or 15 years ago. A quarter of the clubs, it's actually lower. And the reason is because we're depreciating the assets faster than we're replacing them. And that leaves us with stale and out-of-date assets that do not drive membership. We want to use the physical assets to drive membership. The metric that we've discovered that Frank referred to is net worth over time. So it's the equity portion of the balance sheet over time. We've charted it for over 800 clubs since 2006. The median for the industry is a 2.3% compounded annual growth rate. This is an example of a red bucket club's net worth, the average yellow bucket, and Carmel. We're using Carmel as the proxy for with their permission for the green bucket clubs. Red bucket clubs, their members' equity is tanking as this one. This is a real club, which means that their assets are just completely depreciating, and they're depreciating at a rate that's visible to the naked eye faster than they're being reinvested in. Yellow bucket clubs kind of hold their own. They're always robbing Peter to pay Paul. Anyone on this webinar, obviously the managers know this, but anyone involved in governance at their club, it's that annual, we call it the jump ball for capital. What are we going to do this year? Because we never have enough capital to do all the things we need. So we're making decisions versus the green bucket clubs that are generating the necessary capital and continuously reinvesting it, like Carmel. They don't have that jump ball. They don't have that rob Peter to pay Paul. They have adequate capital because they've chosen to have adequate capital, and it manifests as facilities that clearly drive membership. When they started this 20-year cycle that they're in, effectively started in roughly 2004, their initiation fee was $40,000. It's now $85,000, and they've had a net growth in members of about 200 over that period of time. So that's a geometric explosion in initiation fee income, which is capital, and it's all related to investing and keeping relevant the facilities within which the member experience is delivered. Next slide, please. So the measure that you can use that literally is a 10-minute exercise is what we call the net to gross property, plant, and equipment ratio. Every club is going to have a ratio between 0 and 100%. And the closer it is to 0, the less relevant the facilities are and the less impact they'll have on membership. And the closer it is to 100%, the more relevant the facilities are and the more impact it will have on the membership intake. And we can see the distribution on the next slide from over 800 clubs. We've measured it. So you can see the ratio goes from 5% to 85. Now, I've been in the club that's 5%. You can imagine what it might look like or smell like, and that imagination would be correct. The median club has a net to gross ratio of 46%, which means their asset base is halfway through its depreciated life, roughly. That red bucket club that had the declining net worth, their net to gross ratio is 38. Anything under 40, we give a red flag to. I've been in enough clubs to know that the red, yellow, green meets the eye and meets the experience of the incoming member who might be thinking of joining. When it's red, it doesn't look so great. When it's green, it looks great. Yellow's in the middle. Caramel is at 65%. They're probably higher. I have to update it for the recent project. They could be in the 70s. Those are fresh, relevant, up-to-date facilities. So all we need to do for each club in this meeting is measure this metric and place ourselves on the curve. We'll do it for you for free. But then instantly you're going to have a quantitative measure that will very accurately reflect if your facilities are actually contributing to your ability to attract and retain members. Look at the initiation fee in each of the quartiles. You can see as this ratio grows, and this is all clubs in one bucket, clubs without golf and with golf. You can see as the ratio grows, the initiation fee is growing significantly. By the way, if we put membership churn, the churn is much higher. It's 8% at the median in the lower quartile, and it's 4% at the median in the upper quartile. So it's also churn that changes based on the facilities because they reflect the member experience. Next slide, please. One thing we have to be wary of is the way we use debt in our membership or our facilities equation. We have to make sure, and it happens constantly, that we don't make sure that if we apply debt, we apply it within the context of the net to gross PP&E ratio. A lot of clubs will take on debt, assess the debt out with no consideration of the further obligatory and aspirational capital needs that exist outside the given project. This is an actual example of a real club. In 04, they knew they had to do something because the net to gross reflected it. It was 28%. They took on 15 million in debt, did a clubhouse renovation. The net to gross when the project was done reflected the investment, the capital investment, but they didn't do a forward-looking capital plan that was comprehensive. So while they could pay the debt down, they couldn't keep reinvesting in their asset base. A lot of clubs that are on this webinar that have a lot of debt understand this cycle. So what happened is when I was there in September doing the presentation, they had written the last check on the debt. So the debt was zero, but look what their assets did. They slid all the way back to the left. We can't have these multi-20-year generational projects. The investment in capital, the investment of capital in facilities that drive membership has to be consistent over time, just as Carmel has done for the last 15 or 16 years. We showed the projects. There's a new peak now for the new clubhouse renovation. It's been consistent. Too many clubs do a big project and then they take a big breath and stop. McMahon Group and Club Benchmarking in our partnership in the Club Leadership Alliance we suggest and believe firmly one of the best practices is a master campus and facilities plan that ties board to board, president to president, gets us out of this project of the year or month game, and assures that we have a vision and a plan to keep our assets fresh in a continuous manner over time. That is a critical aspect of having facilities that will consistently drive membership intake and retention. And then just for a summary again, this is the last piece of my puzzle of this webinar. This is that life cycle, and for those involved in governance on the club or the management team as leaders, it's very clear that on the margin, the industry, I'm talking generically now, let's say the 3/4 of the clubs that aren't green bucket clubs, the key decision that can be made, and frankly, it's so easy to make, is on the margin, we got to get that 15% of the overall money coming out of the members' pockets that goes to the capital ledger. We need to make that closer to 20%. It's a very marginal impact, as I said earlier, to the member, $1,000 a year, but over a 10-year cycle or a 20-year cycle, it's a massive difference to the club, and it will manifest in facilities that are much more relevant and fresh. And that will, as we've seen, change the membership experience, and will change the future fortune of every club that makes that decision. It's as clear as a bell, and the data supports it. So capital is the key to facilities that drive membership. Thank you.
Ray, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. I'm going to ask you to stay right there, and I'm going to invite the other presenters to come back on the screen. We've got a couple minutes here to do a Q&A. So if you have any questions that you'd like to submit, please type those in now. I'm going to go ahead and let's see if Frank, great, because we got this one, I'll send your way. Frank, it says, we are a golf-centric club, Canada Prairies. A private equity group has offered building a $6 million indoor tennis, pickleball, fitness center, academy of golf, simulators and teaching center, lounge, etc. What are the top amenities that drive membership?
In that space, you're saying, Henry, or in that sports space that they're talking about?
Well, I guess because they're saying this equity group has come in and said, hey, we'll build you this indoor, facility that includes all these things. Is that, what's included in there? Are those the top amenities that drive membership?
Oh, they certainly be very helpful to membership. You'd have to know a little bit more about the total picture of the club. We kind of have the hierarchy. I think we express right now is that dining and social investments are number one. Everybody eats, and that affects the most people. Number two is the swimming and all those areas, because it's right in the sweet spot for the joining group. And then three, we put in that fitness and wellness category. That's generally the hierarchy investment, leaving golf aside for a moment for what you would do on the course or any of those kinds of things is where the money would go. So, but your question is really around more of a kind of creating a sports activity center and that sort of thing. And I think that goes to the broad picture of year round. Certainly be something you'd get out of that variety, family. That would be a diverse using group that could be using that facility also too. So I think all of those would contribute to membership in the category of year-round activity of sports club. I'm kind of a theory. I think a lot of clubs are going to be kind of very much sports clubs with nice golf courses around them in the future, more so than maybe the traditional club of the past.
Yeah, Henry, this is Bill. What we're seeing, I've got 4 projects today that are traditional golf clubs with full service, secondary type of country club, swim, tennis, etc. And all four of those clubs are building what these people are proposing, which is the Family Recreation Center, which is a year-round facility like Frank mentioned, with simulators and fitness and outdoor dining, but it's for year-round use. And that, in my opinion, golf is as successful as it can possibly be right now. Now, the big challenge for us is to keep it that way. With that, as much golf course, much play off the course as on the court. But I'm finding in almost all my projects now, this is the, if you really want to attract the next generation of members, keep the golf great and add this facility. The only thing I would challenge this club a little bit on is the issue of bringing in an outside investor to do this is going to change the culture of that club. And that's something strategically you have to really look at, because all of a sudden you're going to have a profit motivator, which is fine, dealing with normally a nonprofit golf club, and you get two different themes going on at the same time. But what they're proposing to build is something that's very, very important today for the next generation of members.
Okay, thank you, Bill. And keeping with that theme of the amenities and building those, what would you say are the trends and added amenities for city clubs? We've talked a lot about the country clubs, but what about our city club friends?
Well, Henry, that's a real challenge today, because the COVID has affected them much more than the country club. And the issue, like when I've talked about to the industry before, and I'm talking about to them in June, a big group of them, is what we've had great success in St. Louis is taking our city clubs and building satellites in the suburban areas. And then both clubs are surviving, and they're providing a year-round service that, quite frankly, is considerably less expensive than a country club with a golf course. And if you're not playing golf, this becomes a very viable option. And so in St. Louis, you've got, the Missouri Athletic Club, you've got the Racket Club. These are clubs that are really succeeding in a niche. We did the Briar Club in Houston and stuff like that. So I think that's going to be the future of the city club. They're going to have to get satellites outside the central city to expand. Like, obviously, we talked McFadden at the Union League. He's done it to the nth degree, and he's proven that it really does work.
Okay, thank you. Question, and maybe Frank or Bill step in on this one is, how do you convince older club leaders who do not want to change or debt? They don't want to have debt to, add these amenities to, make their club more successful moving forward and attracting those members.
Well, I'll take it first, Frank, then you grab it. But we're finding in our surveys that the older members are smarter than we think. They don't want to be assessed and pay for everything up front. So they too are basically favoring a pay-as-you-go process by which you borrow capital. Capital is cheap today. The key thing is you can borrow capital at 4% and make 10% to the bottom line for the club. That's a wise investment. If capital costs 10%, you probably can't do it. So what we're seeing here is that, you're going to have to do something like that to basically grow these clubs. Frank, what do you think?
Well, I think that's right. And one of our, again, Ray mentioned, COA best practices. One of our other best practices there is the, data-driven leadership. And the idea, you just have to look at the facts. The reality is that, most joining occurs among people between the ages of 35 and 45. And it said the average joiner is a 42-year-old couple. We're thinking about, again, the country club space. So, it's just right as, it's as plain as the nose on your face. I mean, people don't wake up at the age of 65 and say, I think I'll go join that club now, right? So the group needs to understand that. We're not going to drive them out of the club. And as Bill's saying, by how you choose to pay for it and all that will have big impact. But, they like a lot of those amenities too. Again, fitness, for example, we always say, well, we've got to have that for the young people. And there's a lot of gray hair in the club fitness center when we put them in there, so, and so that's okay. That's great. But financially structured well, and then just really having them see the data that just says, we have no choice but to renew. That's one of the beauties of clubs, is getting new and younger members and that continual turnover of people. And so that's when it happens in life. And I think with a good explanation, good story, and a sound financial model, they'll be with you.
Yeah, the other thing, Henry, is the value. In St. Louis, the Missouri Athletic Club, I think their full dues are $400 a month. The full dues at our top level country clubs are $1,200 to $1,500 a month. Which do you think that young generation can afford to join at the beginning? And the Missouri Athletic Club provides 5 different outlets for golf. You pay as you play, as opposed to a club that, so you can see what's happened at the smart city club that goes after that millennial with a product, and people that don't play the golf seriously to pay it worth $100,000 to join and $1,500 a month. They have a niche if they go after it, but they're not going to get that niche staying downtown in an area now, especially with our cities today, or not only from a health viewpoint, but from a turmoil viewpoint. They're cursed. They've got to spread out and go where people are.
Interesting. Thank you. And speaking of the gray hairs, no offense, Ray, I'll have this question coming to you on this one.
I appreciate that, Henry.
Club membership is economy sensitive. Should we be expecting problems in the near future? How to best address that? I know, Frank was talking about earlier, clubs in Atlanta with waiting lists, and we've seen that across country, but what can we expect, or how can we prepare for, if something happens with the economy? We're seeing with inflation now, or here on the East Coast, I can't buy gasoline, or, those types of things.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I have to say, to be frank, I don't know if I can completely answer the question, but I did have a thought the last couple of days when the market was doing the tank on inflation fears. Let's say for 20 years now, we've effectively lived with very modest or moderate inflation for an extended period. I have a little clipping out of the Boston Globe that my father cut out of the newspaper in 1981. I got out of college in 80, and it had a table that showed the prime rate. The prime rate, from the late 70s through 82 or 3, whatever it was. It was like 18.5%. We can remember this if we're old enough and have gray hair. I actually started thinking yesterday and Monday, I'm like, what does happen to clubs in a high inflation environment? And to be frank, I'm not sure. I've been in the business for 12 years, but inflation has been very modest. So it's a good question. I think it takes a little noodling. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I know this, that whatever happens in the economy, whether it's the 08-09, which was deflationary, or inflation, it's the member experience at the club. And the stronger it is, the more likely the club will weather the storm. And the clubs that have the fresh and up-to-date facilities are the ones that are going to be stronger going through those economic cycles than the ones that don't, So we've been saying with McMahon Group, I think for the last couple of years, we'll be working together. Before the pandemic, I know at Club Benchmarking, we're working our tails off to in anticipation of the next recession. We didn't think it would be because of a pandemic, but it was. But we were saying at clubs, and have been, and McMahon Group, invest while you can. Do the getting while the getting's good. Because when that next cycle of down, whatever the economy does, you don't want to be caught with bad facilities in a poor membership experience, because it probably ain't going to end well.
All right.
And Henry,
Frank, okay, Christian.
That a little bit, Henry. Obviously you can have all exogenous events that blow up economies, but actually Christian Clare and I were the ones we got that birth year chart that we're showing there is really out of investment magazines, really talking about what you call the middle to young ratio. And in any period in economic history, when the middle age is growing, which is really reflecting now the millennials going there, you have household formation, you have assets and equities grow, and by extension, you're going to have club membership grow as a result of that. We are such in a sweet spot right now as an industry if we respond over the next 8 to 10 years, and because this economy will be growing, because so many people are entering their prime joining years. We need the product, but the supply side of this is going to be very, very positive for us. So, anything can happen at any time, but the numbers are very much in the favor for clubs, equities, home building, all those things that you're seeing today.
Yeah, and to add to that, Frank, last week in the Journal, there's a full-page spread about food and beverage and the effects that's going to have, and they're projecting there could be as much as a 20% increase when you go out to dine at a restaurant because
I
of,
mean, the prices.
yeah, the 20% increase. And that has to do with restaurants are having to change the way that they're doing benefits for their workers with the COVID environment. A lot of things got accelerated. So, you know, when you look at clubs and you look at the open marketplace, who they would be competing with in terms of where do people go to dine, that there's a lot of pressure on other parts of the market that absorb it in different ways.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, this is Bill, that I think is important to remember is that projects that we did like Country Club, Club Pelican Bay down in Naples, we spent about 30 million for a project. Today, that project, 5, 6 years later, would cost 40 million. Really, the people that made those investments early are those brick and mortar. It's unbelievably valuable. It's going to be very hard for the later clubs to get. The nice thing is to borrow dear dollars to have good purchasing power and pay it back with cheap dollars, which is the government's game too. But it does make sense. In other words, you're getting a lot more value for the dollar you invest today than the dollar you're going to pay back in the future. And that's why I think you're seeing such a boom in construction and club facilities that are going crazy to try and get into the cheap money, but also get into the more valuable cash and pay it back with the cheap cash in the future. It's an interesting period, very interesting.
Okay, and I'll do one more. That is deep or unknowing. With regard to city clubs, where do you see dress codes trending?
Well, I'm going to say this, Bill, again, but and anybody else can. Dress codes are going to have to reflect what people, how they wear and what they wear to work. And remembering that the city club of the future is not going to be the work club anymore. It's going to be, as the cities pick up, like Chicago does, the complete population. Dress code has to match the way people live today in those areas. And trying to push them into any kind of a strict dress code doesn't mean you can't have a room that's a coat and tie room, but you sure better not make the lobby of the club that restrictive, because otherwise you'll have no members. Anybody else, Frank, or anybody weigh in?
Remember, we were just spent time with Matthew Walnut at Jonathan Club. They used the cover of COVID and the crisis to change those rules and say casual dress now through the club and is acceptable as to the change there. And there's just a good example of that. They pushed that through now, and I think that's a precursor to what you're going to see at the rest of the clubs. Dress, decorum have changed in the COVID period, and clubs are going to have to reflect that.
Okay. Well, outstanding. Well, thank you, Phil. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Bill. And thank you, Ray. Outstanding information and great presentation. And thank you for the attendees. We hope that you'll be able to join us for our next Club Trends webinar, which will focus on how understanding and creating a club's culture begins with orientations. Thanks so much and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.